So I don't just read. I read as a way to try to understand the world, but I also do things in the world and try to put my ideas, the hypothesis I get to from reading, into action. And I've realized I've actually done a lot more wide range of things, I think, than most people have, tried a wider range of things, which might be partly because I'm naturally curious, but also partially because, as a very weird person, the standard advice doesn't always work for me. And so I wanted to talk today, on Valentine's Day, about the time that I went speed dating, which wasn't for the most obvious reason. I mean, I'll get to that. But the actual reason that I decided to do speed dating is, so as I mentioned in my New Year's resolution video, I knew I was likely to get laid off, and I knew that if I wanted to have a shot of making self-employment work, I needed to do 4 things, which I talked about there. But one of those things is self-promotion. And so I'm like, okay, what can I do that is going to be uncomfortable to make me better at self-promotion? Because that is something that I've been thinking about both from the $1 Million Weekend, which I've talked about in another video, and also I've realized I have a lot of things in common with Mormons. Like, Mormons tend to read a lot, and in a lot of the same way I do. Mormons also, with their missions, have frequently lived abroad. I've lived abroad for a couple of years. But then the thing that Mormons have done that I have not done is with the mission, with the trying to sell yourself hard, and I needed to get better at that. And I was like, okay, speed dating sounds very awkward as an autistic person. And on top of that, I am fat, and I'm about to be unemployed. So it is going to be a hard sell for something like speed dating where you're trying to make a first impression. It's all going to be on how good I am at conversation. And so I was like, this seems like a good way to put myself out there in a way that forces me to get good at self-promotion. And so I found one place, I signed up, I went there, and it turned out there were 10 men and 3 women who showed up. And so I actually got a comp for a free one. And then that next one I went to, that was, I think, also 10 men, maybe 9, and then 5 women. So it was still a not great gender ratio. And the woman running it was adamant that usually it's a lot closer. And I just got unlucky twice. I don't know. But again, the point wasn't really to try to find a date, although I did end up getting 2 matches on the second one. And one of them mentioned she was into puzzles. So hey, do you want to do an escape room? One of them, longer conversation, and I won't get into, but I had a couple suggestions for that. And both of them were actually, no, not interested after matching, so that was that. But again, that was not really the point. The point of doing the speed dating in the first place was that I was trying to get myself out there, get better at self-promotion. And so there were 8 women I talked to across those 2 nights. 2 of them, I was like, oh wow, we have a lot in common. I would really like to have more of a conversation here. And so one of the things that I read about speed dating before doing it is that generally men have to rule themselves in and women have to rule themselves out. And I realized, at least for me, like making decisions, that was the case. Of the 8 women I talked to, there were only 2 that I didn't match. One of them, it was because she pretty clearly had lifestyle stuff that was not compatible. And the other one, and even that one I agonized over a little bit, was the way she made conversation felt sort of like I had to explain everything. And then afterwards, I'm like, I've come to realize most people don't actually follow most of what I'm saying a lot of the time. They just don't tell me. And so that actually could have been a green flag. But at the time, I was like, it felt uncomfortable to have to keep explaining stuff. But anyways, I matched, or I said, yeah, I would like to get to know better 6 of them aside from those 2. And then I matched with 2 of them there were 2 who I was like, oh wow, this really seems like I really want to get to know them better. And then the other 4, it was like, oh, I like talking to them. They seem nice. I would like to get to know them better. I don't know if it would go anywhere, but low pressure date like an escape room or an open mic night was one of the things I suggested to the other women I matched with. And neither of them wanted to actually go on a date after matching, but my understanding is that was actually pretty good. But again, the point wasn't really dating. Like, if I find someone who seems like a good fit, or even just someone who seemed interested in me and there's no reason not to, I would certainly do that. But the point of this was, I was thinking about it in terms of self-employment. What can I do to put myself out there in a way that is going to be awkward and uncomfortable? Anyways, that was just a short thing I wanted to talk about. I don't really have any lessons here. Although in terms of reading, I brought my e-reader, and I ended up reading, the first night I was reading something called Ade's Fables by George Ade, which it's on Gutenberg. I don't know if they're available physically, and I could not figure out what was going on with those. Like, reading his biography, it was like, this sounds like an interesting person, but reading the actual fables, I'm like, I don't get this at all. And then the second time I was reading Jack Vance, not this, I have all of his works, you can get DRM free from his website, and I have all of them, and I was reading some of his short story collections, rereading those. But Again, it's not so much directly about reading, although with Taleb and Antifragile, like it is a good idea to actually be doing things. But it's more about just this is, I do things, I try things to test my ideas. And in this case, the idea I was testing is, well, first of all, I need to get better at self-promotion, which I still think is true. And second of all, I was thinking that speed dating was going to be extremely awkward, force me to sell myself, and that would sort of push me. And it ended up being much more pleasant than I expected, which is also why I haven't done it again after the free comp one, is because it's not, I don't think it's worth, again, I'm not in a place where I'm really actively trying to date right now, and being currently unemployed or trying to be self-employed, and currently that's not going to be easy anyways. But it was interesting because the people you meet at speed dating, I was actually surprised. Everyone I met pretty much was a very interesting person with a very interesting background. And I think you could say a lot of people will have that if you dig. But certainly I think people who go to speed dating, at least based on my experience, tend to be more adventurous. They also, a lot more people who seem to be potentially neurodivergent. There was at least two of them, and those were the two that felt like really good match, like I wanted to have a conversation. I didn't match with either of them. And then others, harder to tell. But anyways, just wanted to talk about that quickly because it's Valentine's Day, and I figured it's a good time to talk about that. And so thanks for watching. I'm Magpie. This is Zuli. And I will see y'all in the next one. Say bye, Zuli. Pretty, pretty parrot. Little birdie Betty. Yeah, little birdie Betty. Yes, you're pretty, pretty parrot, but little birdie Betty. What you Scooby doing? Yeah.